This is the Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 3, Episode 36, The Greater Eugene Area Riders. And I'm your host, Tom Butler. I want to start out with a plug for the first Cycling Over 60 annual ride on Sunday, September 14th. You can find all the information about it at cyclingover60.com. Look for the annual event section there. Even if you don't come do the ride, please take a look at the event page. I'd love to have feedback on how to make the page better. This first event is not going to be anything fancy. It's mostly self-supported, but there are plenty of great stops along the route. This year is just a laid-back opportunity to get out and ride together. Plus, it starts what I hope will become an annual celebration of cycling as a way to be active later in life. I'm taking a bit of a risk, so I'll need people to be prepared to be flexible. I've been told by Pierce County that they have targeted the middle of September to have a bridge called the Spiked and Ditch Bridge completed. So having a route on September 14th that goes over the bridge is a bit of a risk. With a week to go, if the bridge isn't going to be opened, I'll have to change a couple of routes. It doesn't change the starting point either way. I figure, why not go for it, even if there might be a bit of a change? I've always seen taking a bit of a risk as like a fun challenge. If you can make it on September 14th, please go to the event page and fill out the registration. I need to have an idea about how many people are going to join us. And if you're willing to pitch in to help with the ride, please email me. You can find my email in the show notes. There are several small tasks that you could help with and still ride. I'm going to be working out some details probably all the way up to September 14th, but I will communicate along the way with everyone who registers. A big shout out to Tacoma Washington Bicycle Club for embracing this event and providing support. A listener named Steve in Corvallis, Oregon, sent a message asking for information about the cruise bike that we had a motor put on. I just want to remind people that the text link on the podcast doesn't give me your contact information. So Steve, I need you to email me so I can respond. And again, you can find my email in the show notes. My Cycling Over 60 journey started by training for the Cascade Bicycle Club 2-day, 207-mile ride from Seattle to Portland. In July, I did the ride for the third time. Last year, we did a 14.3 mile per hour average pace. This year, we had a goal of doing 15 miles per hour average. One of the biggest threats to be able to do that could have been the heat on day 2. It was around 100 degrees with the heat coming off the pavement. But we actually did 15.9 miles per hour on average for day 1 and 16.7 miles per hour on day 2. I know this might be strange to some, but to others you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That 15.9 miles per hour average killed me. We were so close to 16 miles per hour. In fact, as we were approaching the end for that first day, I thought we had more miles than we did. And I thought for sure we were going to make the 16 miles per hour average. And when I found out we only had a little way, I just picked up the pace as fast as I could. We actually ended up at 15.94 miles per hour. But man, I wish I would have known earlier that we were getting close to the finish. I'm certainly thrilled with that result. And there were a lot of things happening that made that possible. But the biggest thing was this is the first year that Garen was able to ride at a pace that was somewhat of a challenge for him. At one point, he turned to me and said that his legs hurt. I was like, well, welcome to the club. It also was the least he had prepared for the STP. So that was part of it. But he was able to ride faster than he had the other 2 years. And I spent a lot of time drafting behind him. I did pull some, but I really benefited from him pushing the pace. Cool thing is on the first STP we did, I asked him a lot of times to slow down. This year, I only needed to back off when climbing hills. That was a huge indicator of my increased power. At one point, we were going 19 miles per hour average over a segment that is about 13 miles long. I realize that isn't a huge deal to many serious cyclists, but is a real improvement for me. I think it's reasonable that my focus on functional threshold power, or FTP, after I got the Swift set up last winter, improved my ability to stay on Garen's wheel longer. FTP will again become a focus this winter on the trainer. Thanks to a listener named Jim from Texas, I now have a set of power pedals. I'm going to be talking more about them in another episode. For now, I will say that I love them. Thank you, Jim. I think there is still a possibility to improve my STP performance, and I still want to consider doing the STP in one day, but I would need to see a big improvement to get there. Between the 2 days, we were on the road both moving and at rest stops for a total of 17 hours. So that is too long to make it in one day. Next year, we will not attempt one day for sure, so I have a couple of years to see if I can improve enough to consider it. I should mention that our second day had about 30 miles that were assisted by a great tailwind. That was awesome, except that it created a situation where the heat impacted us more. We spent that time with virtually no headwind, and we could really feel the 100-degree temperature that my bike computer measured for that segment. If STP isn't moved to earlier in the summer, heat is going to be a consistent issue. It is not getting cooler around here. So all in all, I was really pleased with the STP this year. We had a friend Chris join us, and we really enjoyed his company. Despite the fact that Chris mostly rides a mountain bike, and he prepared for like 2 weeks, maybe even less, on an older trek he borrowed from me, Chris seemed to have no problem with the ride. It should be interesting to see what Chris could do if he was on a bike of his own and he put in some serious training time for STP. As I said over and over again, my cycling journey, and STP is a big part of that, really shows what is possible when you get out there and you become active. I believe that the local bike club is truly an essential component to a community's bike culture. I've become really interested in how clubs can stay vibrant. Recently, I did a couple of group rides with the Greater Eugene Area Riders, known as Gears. As the name indicates, it's a club in Eugene, Oregon. I see Gears as doing a lot of things right. Bob Lewis was a ride leader on one of the rides I did, and he did a great job. So I asked Bob to come on the podcast and talk about his cycling and Gears. I also wanted Bob to talk about the role of ride leader as well. Ride leaders provide a really valuable service, in my opinion. Here's our conversation. I want to welcome Bob Lewis from the Greater Eugene Area Riders, also known as Gears, to the podcast. Thank you, Bob, for joining me.
Glad to be here.
I want to ask a bunch of questions about Gears and the role of a ride leader. But first off, what is your earliest memory of the bicycle?
Riding around my neighborhood in Kentucky, Indian Hills, so it had a lot of rollers. I thought they were real big hills at the time, but then since, when I didn't move to Oregon till 2019, so I did, some riding and on the hills and Indian Hills, and I always lived on that side of town, and they didn't seem so big anymore.
Right.
had a Swin bike, a used Swin bike, and I think I left it out in the driveway, and my father ran over it. That was kind of a traumatic experience, but he got me another one, and I took better care of it.
Okay, yeah, that's one of those things. That's a learning experience for sure.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a bunch of kids you could ride with? Or
yeah. We had, I had a friend, Jimmy Swain, a year younger than me, just lived, right across. I could see his house from my house. He was the first guy when we moved into the neighborhood. It's a fairly new neighborhood when we moved in. Met him the first day I moved in, I guess.
I think that's some of the funnest memories is, just being out as friends on a bike and, the freedom that it gives and everything.
Yeah. We were able to ride around, they're building, the neighborhood got expanded, over the years, and we were able to get some materials and build tree houses and, from the scraps in front of the houses and whatnot.
Nice.
Through the houses that are being built, that kind of thing.
That's awesome for sure. Were you pretty consistent with cycling throughout your life?
Not really. Well, I got a bike when I was in college, a 10-speed, and I rode it to and from class. During the summer, I'd ride it around town in Frankfort, and then one weekend, I decided to ride up to a little town called Midway, which is midway between Frankfort and Lexington, on the railroad track, I guess. And then I got on the newly finished interstate, I-64 there, from Midway to Frankfort, and rode the bike on the interstate, with no traffic, because, they'd finished paving it, but they hadn't opened it to traffic yet. You can really fly on a bike on the interstate.
That's awesome.
I just, that section of between Midway and Frankfort, just, slight rollers. And so, yeah.
Now, how far would that have been?
It was probably 10 miles. It's about 10 miles from Midway to Lexington, or to Frankfort. So.
And so after college, did you stay on a bike like
I
many of
still
us
had that
did?
bike. I carried that bike all the way through. I guess I finally, and I had it turned into a 5 speed because they told me they couldn't find a park for, it was before the internet and all that. And they said they couldn't find a park for the front derailleur. So I just had a 5 speed for a while and I'd rode it around. My daughter, as they grew up, I'd ride with them some just around the neighborhood. And then when I retired the first time in 2006, and they bought me a giant Cypress. So it's a fairly heavy bike, but it's a three gears on the front, and, six on the back. Handlebar shifters, sitting up. And so my youngest daughter and I, she was in between going from college. She just graduated from college, going to grad school, and I just retired. And so we rode around. She got the book from about horse farms around Lexington, Kentucky. So we did a lot of those and did some rides around Frankfurt and whatnot. So, and then that's kind of got me hooked back on the bike. And then I joined the Bluegrass Cycling Club out of Lexington, but they had a ride every Monday in Frankfurt. So, that worked out well for me. And then they also had one in Midway, which was, only about 10 miles from my house. So I just loaded it in the car and rode there. And then the rest was history, I guess.
At that point, it sounds like you kind of discovered that you really liked spending more time on the bike.
Yeah. And then, in Frankfurt area for sales, Midway, Lexington, they all got a lot of rollers. There's Catawba River goes through there. So there's some hills if you want them. From my neighborhood, it's kind of like here in Eugene, I could be out on a country road and, a couple of 3 miles, farm roads, not a whole lot of traffic. So
now, is that a place where you're shut down in the wintertime or can
yeah,
you...
in Kentucky, the club there, they don't track they don't have a lot of scheduled rides between the end of October and the 1st of March. They have some rides. I mean, there's days you can ride, and I rode a fair amount if the weather's good. But yeah, you get a lot of ice and there's a lot more ice and snow than we do here in Eugene.
Gotcha.
So I don't want to ride in ice or snow.
So when you look back at your cycling, do you have some special memories?
Oh yeah. There's a road, Shedrick Ferry Road, and anytime it's got a ferry in it, that means there's a hill. So, you got to go down to the ferry and then go back up a hill. There's
Right.
In Frankfurt, there was that road. It was always kind of daunting when you first did it the first time you did it, and then after that, oh, it's just a hill. They have a Horsey 100 that the Bluegrass Cycling Club sponsors every year, Memorial Day weekend. They start in Georgetown, Kentucky, which is just north of Lexington, and they'll either go east toward Bourbon County or west toward Frankfurt, and it's got a lot of a century will have 5,000 feet. And, I usually did the metric 100, 62 miles, 63 miles. They have like 1,500 riders that come from all over the country to ride in that Horsey 100. But those rides were, very memorable, certainly. They had some lady that was a racer, she did a lot of racing, but she sponsored hill rides. I still show them on the Facebook from Bluegrass Cycling Club. They do a hill ride on Mondays, and then they go down to the ferry roads and go back up. They go out of the hills. So it's and then you got the distilleries. There's a section called Glens Creek Road that goes along where Old Crow, Old Granddad distilleries are. They've got a new place called Castle and Key Distillery that took over one of those old distilleries and spruced it up and made it look pretty. You're riding along those. You smell all the bourbon, from the warehouses.
In my mind, I'm picturing rolling green hills that you're riding through and white fences.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of horses, a lot of cows. There's a lot of agriculture. There used to be a lot of tobacco. Not so much of that anymore. But there's still a fair amount of, obviously around Lexington, Bourbon County, for sale. There's a lot of horse farms, still out there. Big horse farms. So.
Also, don't think of a ferry ride in Kentucky. I'm pretty familiar with the ferries up here in the Seattle area.
Yeah, well, they've got an active ferry there that you go Fayette County, which is Lexington, Kentucky, and it goes across the Kentucky River, and you end up in Madison County, Richmond, Kentucky. So there is an active ferry there, and I think there's another one down in goes around over the Cumberland River down in southern Kentucky. That's operational. So there are a couple of ferries there, and there's I think there's also one that goes over the Mississippi River in far western Kentucky. Kentucky's got a very very terrain. You get on far western, it's pretty flat, and you get up in the mountains, and you get some pretty good, about the size of the Cascades, or maybe a little less. But I guess there's another memorable ride from Kentucky is that there's they've got an old rails trail road that, you going through a couple of tunnels. They're hauling lumber, I think, out of the hollow.
So do you know of like a cross Kentucky ride? Because it does seem like that would be.
Well, the state, I don't know if you on a map, it's pretty far.
Yeah.
I think it's like 400 miles across the whole state. There is the Trans Am, I think, goes through Kentucky, Transamerica route. There's some roads that goes one, north south, and I think there is an east west route through Kentucky.
I mean, that sounds like a fun adventure to take a while, and again, because you're gonna experience a lot of different terrain from western to eastern Kentucky.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I say, around central Kentucky, you got the Kentucky River there, but then there's also a lot of distilleries that, they got tours you can go through, and Shakertown, the Shaker Village there in Mercer County. It's right there near on the river. Place to visit.
Hey everyone, I'm briefly interrupting this episode to remind you that it is simple to have your opinion shaped the Cycling Over 60 podcast. Look for a link at the top of the episode description that says send me a text message. When you tap the link, a text message box will open up and you can type something that will be sent directly to me. I look forward to reading all your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for the show. Now back to the discussion. So at some point you decided to transition to the West.
Yeah, I've got two daughters that transitioned before I did. My oldest daughter came out here for graduate school, never left, got 2 kids. And then my youngest daughter got a job in 2013 teaching at the university. My wife retired before I did, and then I retired for good in 2015. I retired in 2006. That's when I got the first bike. And then I went back to work after they called me up and said, "You want to come back to work?" And I said, and my daughter was going to graduate school by then, so I didn't have anybody to ride bikes with at the time. So I took them up on that, and then stayed for another 9 years.
Wow. So when you say they bought you a bike when you retired the first time, who was the they?
My daughters.
Okay, nice.
My daughters,
good kids.
They knew I had that bike I had was a 5-speed, and then they figured I needed something to do when I was retired, and they were right.
What are you riding now?
I've got a Specialized Diverge.
Okay.
My daughter and I bought a used Trek back, I don't know, it's about maybe 2010. She wanted to have a bike when she came to visit to ride. And so we bought it. It was a Trek road bike. And, I just had to jack the seat up a little bit when I rode it. But I ended up riding it a lot more because it was a lot lighter than that Giant that I had. So I ended up making that my road bike. And then I hit a pothole one day, and I didn't think anything about it. And I took it into the shop to get them, to work on it, do a little maintenance on it. And they said, you had a cracked bracket, lower bracket. I didn't know.
Wow.
So, that's when I bought the new bike in 2018.
Are you happy with it?
Yeah. My son-in-law had got a new bike, and he said, "You want a new set of rims, and you can put some wider tires, because I can get up to 42, 43-inch tires on it." So I've got a wheel set that I can put gravel tire. I got gravel tires on 42-inch tires. I usually run 31 on the one I've got on the road, but I can also run gravel. So
when you moved out, were you looking pretty quick for a club to ride with?
Well, we moved in 2020, so I was riding by myself.
Right.
With COVID, because that was the beginning, right at the beginning of God. I don't know if the bike club, I don't even know. I'd ridden with them. We bought the house in 2019, and we came out there and spent a month and a half. And I rode, 4 or 5 rides with them in 2019 with the club. So I knew, and I think I went ahead and joined too. And then, when COVID hit, I did riding by myself for probably 6 months. And then they started to have some group rides, you kept far away from each other and all that. So when it became a little safer to ride out, when they figured out that outdoors was probably okay, and then I started riding with gears.
Would you say that Gears is pretty similar to the club in Kentucky, or?
Well, I think the one club in Kentucky has more members. It's kind of similar to gears. We would like to think we have a lot of people from the surrounding cities. We certainly Springfield and Eugene both contribute to our club, and we've got a couple from Junction City and a couple from Cottage Grove. I don't know if we have anybody from Crestwell or not, but in Lexington they have they had a ride out of Frankfort every week. They had one out of Midway every week. They had one out of Nicholasville every week. They had one out of Richmond. So they, a lot bigger organization.
Gotcha.
But as far as the group rides, and they're very similar. I did a lot more pace line. I rode. They do letters on their rides. They got C ride is fairly slow, 10 to 12, and then B, and then AB, and then A, and then EF. I think was extra fast. I don't know. I never did know what it exactly meant.
Okay.
I never did do that one. I didn't do. I usually did at B or AB pace. We do some 16, but we did double pace line. We'd have 15, 20 people, and we do double pace lines on the roads, and then single up when a car comes.
Yeah. So you were moving pretty good, I imagine.
Yeah. When you do pace line, it helps. You got the synergy from that group, and you just stay on the front as long as you can. You rotate over, and you just got to. It's a little more concentration than
right
a single pace line, but certainly because you got somebody on your right, and somebody in front of you, and somebody behind you.
Right. So. Now I understand that your executive director at Gears it's a paid position.
Yeah, I don't know what his title is, but yeah, Mike Cantrell. He runs the website, updates the sign up. We use Sign Up Genius, for signing up for rides. So he, updates that he kind of keeps a rolling calendar on Sign Up Genius for 7 days. We post a PDF of the rides, monthly, and then we also add some rides during the month. But we try to give people an idea of what's coming up.
It seems like having the consistency of that paid position would make a big difference for a club.
Yeah. I mean, he's been a ride leader, and he, been with the club for a while, and he still leads rides. He leads a lot of 10 to 12 rides now. But yeah, he's got that institutional knowledge, and it just kind of helps. The board, they rotate over. Well, the president's been there, I think, 3 years now. So, but we do have a kind of a turnover on the board, so this kind of helps continuity of that. We kind of tell them, "Oh, this is the way we have done things in the past," and then he'll listen to. There's always new ideas coming up, so he's pretty good about helping us out there too.
I had a great experience riding with y'all there. It was really fun, and I plan on doing it again. I'm looking forward to having an experience of throwing my bike on a train and bringing the train down and going for a ride, spending the night down there. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to experience.
Yeah, we had a couple of riders from the club that rode the train up to, I think they got a train in Portland and did the Seattle to Portland ride, a couple of weeks ago. And they did it all in one day, though. It was, 200 miles all in one day. That's just, that's not anything I'm really doing anytime soon, but yeah, the train makes it nice to, and there's some people that, they'll ride up to Portland and ride down, back to down this way.
Yeah, my son-in-law was trying to talk me into doing STP in one day. If we were going to do that at my pace, we'd be on the road for like 17 hours. So
I started at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Kana, she's president, but she said they had a 145-minute break. So
wow.
They try to keep going.
Yeah, nice. Wow. Well, I really appreciate you volunteering as a leader, as a ride leader. It just makes a huge difference. I felt like that ride that I went on with y'all, and I actually went on 2 rides. I went on Saturday, and I felt like they were both really well coordinated. And so thanks for being a ride leader.
Yeah, well, I started to be I was a ride leader in Kentucky before I moved out here, and then I didn't I didn't tell anybody I was a ride leader for, I don't know, a year or something. And then Larry Diffie, we got talking, and then he kind of learned that I'd been a ride leader before. So he recruited me.
I think that's the nature of a local club, is to kind of be on the lookout for people to
Oh,
recruit
yeah.
to
Well, I
different
mean,
things.
we can't have rides if we don't have leaders.
Yeah.
Insurance kind of requires us to have a leader. So that's
Yeah.
a kind of an ongoing dilemma of making sure you got enough ride leaders.
So what originally drew you to it? Did you feel like your background?
Kind of got comfortable with in Kentucky and also here, kind of got comfortable with the rides, the roads that we're going, the turns you make. I just recently got a Wahoo, so I never had a smart computer that gave me turn by turn directions. I used, cue sheets. I have a clip that hangs on the front of my bike. I can do cue sheets, but having that Wahoo makes it a lot better for leading a ride now. Just knowing the ride, knowing the routes and the terrain. I think you can't very well expect a brand new rider to a location to. I mean, some people can do it, but they have a good sense of direction, but you don't want to
Right.
get too many people lost.
Right. How does that process go with gears? Do you same time every week? Make
I'm
a
the ride
decision.
coordinator,
Okay.
ride leader coordinator. So I've got a Excel spreadsheet. It's a calendar basically, and in the middle of the month for the next month, I'll just look at our local rides, rides we've done in the past, from what I can remember we've done, what people, somebody will say, well, I want to go to, I wouldn't mind leading a ride to Deerhorn sometime. Or, they'll give me some input on, where we're riding or so. Well, this was a really good ride. Why don't we do it again? So I'll try to take that into consideration. And then the way on our website, we've got them divided up, like the hundreds are north. And then we've got some to the west. We got hundreds, 200s, 300s, and 400s. And it depends on, what quadrant you're in. So I try to spread it around, so we're not going to north every time. Don't go to Coburg every time. We spread it out. You want to go to Coburg, you want to go to Creswell, you want to go to Bonita, you want to just go different direction, go spread it around. That being said, we do McKenzie View a lot, but that's just kind of a go-to ride. But we've got Slow Mo Monday, so we've got a group of that's a set group of rides that Gary Swanson, who's kind of has led that in the past. He had all these 4 rides he wanted to do, and I finally convinced him on the 5th month, why don't we put a different ride in there just to mix it up a little bit? So because he was just doing a rowing every 4, and they come up a different spot in the month, but anyway. He agreed to that, fortunately. And then on Tuesday we have the Free Fun Fox Hollow. We just ride up to Hendricks Park, and then up Fox Hollow, and back down, and that's like 26 miles and 1,900 feet elevation. And that's a 10 to 12, kind of a fairly slow pace. It's up a hill, so it's you can't go real fast up it. You can go fast down it. And then we have another 12 to 14 pace. It's called Hill Ride, and the leader of that gets to pick the how hilly they want it to be. So well, some days we'll do it. I think it's listed as 25 to 50 miles, and usually they're somewhere around 2,500 to 3,500 feet elevation. So you can go to the west and get hills galore. So we just the leader just tries to pick a route to get the most feet in the least amount of miles.
Gotcha.
It seems like they do that sometimes. And sometimes they'll give you a little break and let you go a little on flat ground every now and then. So and then on Thursdays and Saturdays we have 10 to 12, 13 to 15, and 16 plus. Hopefully, I have trouble getting enough leaders to ride those sometimes. But then we'll have, and that's where we try to spread it out among the 4 quadrants for those 2 days. And then our gravel rides, a leader will just say, hey, I want to do a gravel ride, and tell us where he wants to go, where they want to go, she wants to go. And then we also do some longer rides, or, some some riders will come up with a long ride they want to go to Cottage Grove or go to Brownsville or somewhere, and we'll throw those in on the schedule, either Friday or Saturday or Sunday generally. So that's kind of the.
What are you seeing with gravel rides? Are you seeing popularity increasing with gravel
Yeah,
rides? Or?
yeah, we a lot of people, like I have a wheel set I can switch out to do gravel rides, and a lot of people have bought specific bikes for gravel, and yeah, it seems to be we'll get it depends on there again. You got to watch the fire season and all that, but there's a niche there, for a rider. I know we had Sunday. Week ago Sunday, we had, I don't know, 7 or 8 that went out, did a gravel ride that day. So, we have maybe 2 to 3 a month. So, it's worked out pretty well.
How would you characterize the importance of making rides friendly to new people? Is that something that you specifically think about?
Yeah, and that's a challenge. We want them to sign up on the Sign Up Genius, because they click that they've read the waiver and liability and all that stuff. But a lot of times they'll get a new member that just shows up at the ride, and then you gotta hit them with the paper copy of the waiver, and it could be a little intimidating for especially a new rider. And then I think the deal is the first time they ride, they're covered. But after that, then they're not going to be covered on their insurance. So we just want to tell them that, and then they want to explain to them about the pace groups and are they in the right? Did they sign up for a good one for their speed? Because it's we've discussed maybe we ought to have a test track that if you can do a certain speed on this stretch of road, then you're good to go 13 to 15 pace, or because some people ride by themselves. They may not even have a cycle. Might not know how fast they go. That trying to match them up with the right pace group is a chat. You want to make sure that's going to be key for them too. And we recently discussed next month we're going to try to have some on Saturday, some 13 to 15, but not very long. 20-mile rides, because a lot of people. With families, they can't commit to a 2.5, 3 hour ride. Maybe they have an hour and a half they can spend on a bike. So trying to see if that'll help, people out. We're going to try to add some Monday evening rides, trying to, people that are working. We've got some Thursday night rides, Tuesday night rides. Now we're going to try Monday night rides too. So just to give people that option to try to help. Those are our people that work that can't do our Thursday morning rides or our Tuesday morning rides or Monday mornings. You can't meet everybody's needs, but you try to do the best you can.
Seems like the composition would be quite different between like a Thursday morning and a Monday evening. It seems like.
Oh yeah. And age is a little different too. You got a lot of retired folk, on the morning rides, and then the evening rides are more, you get some of the younger people in there, and then you got a mixed cross section of people on those Thursday night rides, especially.
Do you feel like you're seeing younger people, people in their 20s, being active with the club?
I don't know about 20s. We're getting some 30s. We got one kid that's going. Yeah, he's a freshman. I guess he'll be a sophomore at Oregon. He started riding with us when he was in high school, I think. But that's always that's a challenge. Try to hit that demographic.
Now, what are you thinking about when it comes to making rides safe? Are there some specific things that come to mind?
Ride leaders, we try to give a moment for safety, on our rides. We try to remind them, we had one of the ride leaders commented that, when we said, car back and nobody, they stayed, nobody singled up, and we try to reinforce the fact that, oh, by the way, when we say car back, especially if there's cars coming from the other direction, cars, do a pretty good job of giving us 3 feet, but if there's a car coming in the other direction, it's, on these narrow roads, it's hard to do that. So we just need to be cognizant, we try to remind our riders of that. We try to hope everybody has a mirror. I recently got a bike radar. It's from Trek. It's called Carback. Somebody said, what's your radar? I said, Carback. I said, where? Anyway, it works. There's other ones out there too. I think Garmin has one, but it works pretty good. If you've got riders behind you, it's not quite as, it doesn't, that kind of blocks your view of a car as approaching. But if you're in the very back, it works real good.
So what's the signal when you got a car behind you from that?
I've got it set up where it beeps at me. And It's also on my Wahoo. It's got a line on the side. It's green if nobody's behind me. It turns orange if somebody's behind me. It's got it shows the car as it approaches.
Okay.
And it's pretty slick.
Did you buy that with your computer or?
No, I just bought the Wahoo earlier this year. Well, last week. When did I get the Wahoo? I've had it maybe less than a year, and then I bought the car back. Little bit. I think I might have got. Yeah, I got the radar before I got the Wahoo.
Okay.
But it syncs up to it. It's a Trek brand, but it'll syncs up with the Wahoo just fine.
Well, I'll have to check that out. I've not seen that. I'm kind of in the market for a new bike computer.
I got the Wahoo Element. It's pretty small, but the screen is, you can make the screen, you can put any variables you want on there. I've got it where it's got the temperature on there and elevation gain, gradient, speed, distance. So, it's kind of a full screen, but that's kind of nice to know some of those things.
Now, I think you're saying that the element of riding on rural roads is pretty much the same, or very similar at least, between Kentucky and the Eugene area. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. Some of the roads here have better shoulders than ones in Kentucky.
Okay.
Crow. There's a road called Crow Road here that's doesn't have a lot of traffic on it, but it does have a maybe 2 to 2.5 foot shoulder on it. I think got to watch where it's broken in spots, but other than that, it's not fairly good. It's kind of nice to be able to get away from traffic.
Do you find the drivers to be courteous?
Yeah. Here they're you still get some yahoos that honk at you and scare you to death because you're all over as far as you can get, and they still honk at you. But sometimes they honk at us when we're in the way, and that's understandable. But sometimes they just honk at us, honey. But usually in Kentucky too, we had a few yahoos, but by and large they we were there and kind of tried to give us space.
I was in Eastern Oregon, in Enterprise, Oregon. I don't know if you're familiar with that area, but I had a unique experience, which was there was a cow that had gotten loose and they were trying to corral it off the side of the road. So it was pretty much trying to get away from being corralled. And so I stopped my bike ride and helped kind of corral a cow. So I felt that was a unique Oregon experience.
Well, you can probably get that anywhere, anywhere there's cows.
Yeah, I guess so. How do you handle mechanical issues on a ride?
Well, I think we tell riders that they're responsible for their flat tires and mechanical. But that being said, I've never seen a situation where we've got members that are pretty good bike mechanics and they'll stop and help. And one guy works at a bike store and he'll change it. He'll just get in your way and change your tire for you because he does it so much faster than anybody else could possibly do it. You got those hands.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and if somebody does have a mechanical, somebody who just stays back with them and, make sure if they can't get it going, they've got to, make a call, make sure that if they can get a cell signal and, get a sag support from their house or something. But, yeah, it's been, the club is real good about, helping out and trying to, I know we were riding here recently. Somebody had a flat tire, and I guess it's one of those tires that you can't get off
Right.
or on. And, it took them a while. Said, I guess he had his inner tube that had one of those short stems, and it was hard to get the pump on it. And he, guy that helped him commented, he said, "I'm not always about to make sure I got the long stems from now on." Apparently, they had a heck of a time getting him going. He finally showed up, and then I know we've had some incident where I think on that ride you went on down at Cottage Grove, one guy was wanted to go on an 80-mile ride. I think he made it 20 miles and had a flat, and he didn't have an inner tube, and his patch kit didn't work because the glue was all dried up.
Okay. Yeah.
Last in our newsletter, I put out and said, "Hey, folks, make sure you got a good inner tube, and you want to make sure." I think we had another incident where a guy had inner tube, but it was so old that when he unwound it, it was a mess. So I think one guy, they said he had his inner tube that he got out. It had about 7 patches on it or something. I think so. You gotta invest in a new inner tube. You're out on the road.
Yeah.
And
I could definitely see, myself getting in a situation where I've just not thought about my patch kit,
that's why I kind of said, well, maybe I ought to just put that in the newsletter.
Yeah, I like it.
My article we put in the newsletter and said, you might not check your glue and, make sure you got a good inner tube. But make sure you know how to take the tire off yourself, because that can be a daunting task if you got some of those tires are just, size such that they're hard to get off those rims.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you see Eugene as a kind of a unique area when it comes to cycling? There's the university there, and I would think that
as a university, we got the multi-use path. Granted, there's a lot of walkers and e-bike on it, but it's it's pretty iconic. You can ride along the river, for 15 miles or so, I think, round trip. You got that, and then we've got the Fern Ridge Trail that goes out away from town, and then just you got Fox Hollow, you got Lorraine Highway, you got Gimple to get out of town, going to the west, and then you got more hills after that. So it's got some. If you go south, you can go to Pleasant Hill. We go there a lot. Go down to Creswell. Got a nice bakery at Creswell. That's always a highlight of the trip, is going to and then riding back on the 99 is no treat, but you mainly just try to get the heck off that road in a hurry. And then set a lot of personal best on that road, trying to get off of it. We've got a lot going on between and then I got the Mill Race path over in Springfield that goes out to Clearwater Park. So
it seems like Eugene has kind of a reputation. I mean, kind of in my head, I think of Eugene as being a bit of a fitness town.
Yeah, with the track and field, and they got a lot of runners here, and there's a fair amount. There's a lot of different bike the Doors have some rides. I know Clinks has a ride on Wednesday night, I think. Two first and third Wednesday nights, and then there's a group called Velo that's I don't know if they're a club. I don't know what they're. They have a ride usually on Saturdays, and then there's the time trials. They have a group that does time trials in the spring, different roads. So I think I've heard there's a cyclocross group, that I think it started in the fall. So yeah, there's a lot going on as far as different opportunities. And then there's the mountain bike, that I don't think our insurance allows us to have group rides, mountain bike rides, but there's certainly a lot of mountain bike, got trails here in Eugene, and then my son-in-law goes down to Oak Ridge. He really likes the mountain biking down there. So,
Now, Eugene, I think, is maybe 50 miles from the coast or something like that. But it didn't sound to me like there was options that were really bike friendly to go from Eugene to the coast. Do you know if that's the
no,
case or not?
yeah, the 126, goes to Florence. That's probably the most direct route to get to the coast. But it's, curvy and windy. You got a tunnel you got to go through, narrow road, not much shoulder. So it's not conducive to that. When you go up to Corvallis, I guess you can, or go, yeah, you could go to Philomath, and then go US 20. It's not too bad, but it gets a little narrow when you get closer to Newport. And of course, then you got to get up to get up there from here. So yeah, it's I think the Eugene or the Corvallis Club is going to do a ride coast to coast right there. They ride to the coast and back, I think, on a weekend or something.
And you're climbing up out of the valley to get over to the coast. I imagine there's
Right.
a bit
Yeah.
of elevation
Got
gain.
to go over the coast range. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's 1,000 feet elevation, and we're 300. So you got all that to deal with.
But I bet that'd be a fun ride to do.
The Texas 4,000. I don't know if you've heard of that group. It's out of the University of Texas, and they raise money for cancer. And they go from Austin, Texas, all the way to Alaska, and they come through Eugene every year. And so they have different routes that they go on. I think they've got one called the Rockies, and they got one, the one that comes through here. They came up the coast and cut across from Florence, and they rode on 126 as a group. There was like 25 of them that rode on 126 all the way from Florence to Eugene. But they're young, and they had SAG support.
Right.
So they go from town to town. They either stay in campgrounds or they spend the night at the Y here. When they stayed in Eugene, we the years group, we fed them on Tuesday night, and then we rode with them toward Coburg. They were going north toward. I think we were going to spend the night in Albany or Salem maybe. But anyway, we rode with them for a little while on the way out of
Okay.
town.
That's pretty cool. I'll have to check them out.
Some of them were graduate, getting ready to go to graduate school. Some of them, were still in college. It was kind of interesting talking to them. And then one of the guys, I've been following him on Strava. They'll do 80 miles a day. One day they did 100. I think one day he did 200. He's young.
Okay.
They're going to ultimately, he's got 4,000 that, right. They take turns doing SAG and that kind of thing. So they, not riding every day.
Okay.
They take some days off too. I think they take 60 days to do it. So, but anyway, yeah, they're about finished. I think they end up in Fairbanks.
Well, they must come up if they're going up the West Coast. They must come up through this area at some point, up through the Seattle area. At some point.
Yeah, they went up through. Yeah, they come up through Seattle, and then they end up in Canada, and then they cut across over to Alaska.
Wow, what a ride! That's an adventure.
It was the other, and then like I say, there was another group that rode the Rocky Mountains. One went called the Ozarks. They went up through Arkansas and up that way. So yeah, check Texas 4,000 and just go to the website.
Yeah.
But so it can be. People have ridden 126 to get from Florence to here, but I wouldn't want to. I'd want to make sure I had a group with me and a car behind me or something.
Yeah, that makes a big difference for sure. Does the club hear about like what is happening with public planning for cycling infrastructure and things like that? Biking scene evolving in Eugene?
I don't know if you were on the 13th Street. They made that a bikeway, two-way bikeway, kind of protected. And they did the same thing on the High Street. I think they're going to do it on Lincoln Street. It's coming up next. So they've got projects in the hopper. Of course, federal funding being what it is. I don't know if they're depending on federal funding, it might be a challenge. But I know the city of Eugene, they were talking about having to maybe close down the Amazon swimming pool. I think they figured out a way to keep it open, but that's always a challenge. That's a challenge too. But they do have some project on the calendar. I think there was when we ride out north out of town, we kind of go through some neighborhoods, and there was talk about making a road, a bike path to kind of skirt along a quarry and get, cut out some of the neighborhood for us. But I think Richard Hughes said it was probably going to be 2 years now before that gets developed. So things got pushed back a little bit. But, I think there's still some things in the works. And there's also maintenance they need to do on, there's some bumps on the roads that would be nice to get rid of, but that's
Right.
a challenge too.
So it seems like there maybe is a bit of a desire to have good bike infrastructure at the city level, and it's just a matter of finding the funds to do it.
They recently had a survey of where do we need bike racks, so that's, they're trying to get some input from that, where kind of crowdsource, asking where's a good place to put a bike rack, and of course hopefully get the kind, they've got some out at a bakery that I don't use the bike racks because I've got disc brakes, and the way the bike rack's configured, it's right there on your disc brake or on your disc, and that's never good. Hopefully they're older set of racks. So,
do you have a particular route that is like a favorite of yours in the area?
Well, when I was riding by myself when I first moved here in 2020, I started from home and I'd go out. There's a road called Kirk Road. It's just no hardly any traffic. It's a rollers. You got farmland. So it's kind of nice when you stop at Territorial Road, which you don't want. It's kind of a lot of traffic on it, but then you just turn around and I came back home. Out and back kind of thing. That was kind of nice. The McKenzie View ride is, we do that a lot. It's very scenic. It's, along the McKenzie River, you get glimpses of the river and very well shaded, not a whole lot of traffic. It's got the rollers going there too. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have any I don't like, I guess.
Okay. Have you had a chance to do much cycling in different areas?
Well, I mean, in Kentucky, obviously, and here, and my daughter teaches a study abroad class. It's from the University of Oregon. They start out in Denmark, and then they show the students, the infrastructure in Denmark, which is really good for bikes. And they take them down to the Netherlands and Amsterdam. I think they used to go over to Sweden to Malmo, but I don't know if they're doing that this year. And then they go down to Amsterdam, and then they start at Utrecht, and then they go to Amsterdam. Like this year, she's going to go to Amsterdam and end up in Utrecht. But I was able to join her in 2019 for the last half of that. I flew in and got to Utrecht, got off the airport, went to the train, got on train, got to Utrecht, and then she was there waiting for a bike for me. And then, she had a, place for me to sleep in Utrecht. And then I was able to ride with the group along the Amstel River. We got some road bikes for that and rode up to Amsterdam, and then got a city bike after that. And then I rode around the town while they were doing their classes or whatever. I just went on a self-guided tour, went to the Rice Museum, the Heineken Museum, saw a lot of windmills. That was a fun trip.
That sounds great.
Got to stop and see my niece, and they were living in London at the time, so I got to see her coming and going. So
nice. I'm processing this. Are you saying that your daughter teaches a course where they bicycle around, or
they basically are showing the students the biking infrastructure in those locations, and then they have I think they also have included in the past. They have some professionals. I think some people from the city of Eugene and whatnot have gone, to see, because it's pretty amazing what I saw, and I didn't see in Denmark, but I saw some pictures. But in Amsterdam, they got a road, they got a bikeway that's red, and then they got a walkway. And they got these roundabouts that it's very clear where everybody needs to go. They got a lot of bridges. And you go to the train station, and there's multi-stacked racks to put your bikes in. I mean, it's just,
It's a different environment, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah, she told me, she said, now, Dad, when you go to Amsterdam, you can wear a helmet, but you'll be the only one probably, riding around town. And then I did see a few people that were on road bikes, probably going for a road bike ride, had their helmets on. Most,
Okay.
people just, go around 8, 10 miles an hour and
Right.
in street clothes and
Well,
having that.
that's quite a gig to uh be paid to go over and bike around.
Got like the last time she and her husband did it last time, and it was during COVID, and that was not. She didn't have a real. I mean, she had a good time, but I think there were some people that caught COVID, and they had to
Right.
put them in a segregated room, and so that was a little daunting.
So does she teach urban planning or something that connects her to that?
Yes, she's smart growth, urban planning.
Okay.
That's her public policy. She's in the planning, public policy, and management section of the school of architecture.
Okay.
The
Wow, that's
professor,
awesome.
the professor there. So they kind of take turns. There's another, her boss that at the time he had been doing the class for a while, and then he kind of turned it over to her. And then I think he did it the last time, and so now it's her turn. They do it like every other year.
Gotcha.
So,
That's very cool. What advice would you give to new members who are a bit nervous? Maybe they're even
right.
inexperienced. What would you say to them about joining their first group ride?
Well, they kind of start on a slow group. Even though you think you're a fast rider, I mean, you just because you're fast doesn't mean you have to go fast every ride. I found that out. I've done some, I've led some 10 to 12 rides, and it's very pleasant. Just try to get on the right speed group. That's the main thing. But start with a slow one, and then you can work your way up. That's no problem. We have what we call slow on Mondays, which is kind of a laid back, 10 to 12. Everybody's, and we have a no drop policy, so we make sure we hurry everybody around. But start with that. We have 10 to 12 rides on Thursdays and Saturdays. We try to encourage our ride leaders, to try to be welcoming. And then in the club, the other members are good about, introducing themselves and welcoming people. So it's just something you got to try to do, even though you're introverted, you still need to try to welcome people.
Yeah. Well, I talked to Erin, one of your club members,
Yeah.
and she talked about, getting on a bike and being very inexperienced and just how welcomed she felt by the club. And I just thought that was a great story.
She tell you about her India ride this year?
Well, that's what I had her on talking about, that adventure. So that was pretty impressive challenge for her to take
I
on.
kind of followed her blog, and it was, yeah, she's been on, she was talking about going to Nepal before, and then, that kind of fell through, but, she and Jackie did that India ride.
Yeah. Well, good for her, and good for the club for encouraging her when she was starting out.
I met her at the end of her ride today and we give out socks when you get 1,000 miles with the club in a year. And
nice.
So, in spite of the fact she went on her India trip, she got her 1,000 miles. I guess Saturday is when she got them, but I was on a different ride, so I was over in the area where they started where they started the end of the ride. It was over in Springfield today, and had to go over there and get my car serviced, and then I swam at the pool over in Springfield. And I looked at my watch. Oh, I got my socks with me. I'll see if they're there. And they showed up by the time I got there. It worked out pretty well.
That's fun. I'll have to reach out and tell her congratulations for getting her socks.
Oh yeah. She's pretty proud, pretty happy to get those. That's pretty big. That's like I say, especially when she was gone for 4 weeks. That was a long trip that she went on.
Now, do you talk about as a club, or do you have some thoughts personally about how you can encourage more people in the Eugene area to get on bikes and ride?
Yeah, well, we're like I say, we had a meeting with. We were talking about getting intro to gears biking. Get a couple, on Wednesday night. We want to try a couple of Wednesday nights. Tried to do it last the 16th of July, and it was 100 degrees, so we canceled that.
Wow.
We canceled that one. But just try to put it out there, to the community and say, hey, if you're interested in gears, come and we'll just take a ride on the river path and take a slow ride and talk about it and see how you feel. And then on Wednesday, I told you on Wednesday night we're trying to offer a 13 to 15 pace, not too long, not too hilly, but try to give an opportunity for that. I mean, that's the challenge, is trying to meet people at the right spot. Like I say, some people, you tell, I went on a 25-mile bike ride, and they'll say, oh my gosh, that's so long,
Right.
Once you start riding, that's a short ride.
Right.
So, but for a new rider, that's we trying to start them out, maybe a 10 to 15-mile ride, and just see how it goes.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time and talking about your cycling and talking about gears. I think gears is just a wonderful example of a bike club that is doing a lot of things right.
We'd like to have some more members, because that, it just helps. But, I think, what did we count up? We had 4 rides Saturday. We had 54 people riding Saturday on rides, different areas. We had 3 different pace groups. And then plus we had a group that went up. That's the one I was on. We went up, called Mountain June. It's just a hill close by. I rode 45 miles, and it was 3,500 foot elevation. And 4 of them started from Alton Baker Park, and they went 71 miles and about 4,000 feet elevation. So,
okay,
I didn't want to go that far, that long a distance, but it was still all, I had to go up the same mountain, we all went up the same mountain. So.
Right.
Call it a mountain. They calls it Mount June. And it was, my Wahoo's you have a display showing the approximate gradient. I don't know how, it's pretty close, but when it gets above 10%, it turns red. And so I glanced down there a couple of times, and I saw a lot of red on that hill.
Okay.
Got up to, you get up to the top, and it kind of flattened out, and I was on 4% grade, and I felt like I was going downhill.
Right.
Legs could actually work.
Right.
You find out on those kind of hills, you can find out you can go 3.5 miles an hour,
Yes, that is my experience for sure. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on and talking about it.
Look forward to seeing you on a ride soon.
Well, like I said, I'm really wanting to do more rides where I just hop on a train to bring a whole group down and ride together. That'd be pretty fun.
Well,
all right.
Talk to you later.
Yep. All take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Talking to Bob about his cycling experiences and learning more about gears just inspires me more to get a local group together and go down and ride with gears in Eugene. I think this kind of group ride visitation program could be really fun, and it would be an opportunity to cross-pollinate ideas between clubs. I'd love to hear what you think of the idea. I want to thank all of you that volunteer as ride leaders. It's so valuable to be able to show up for a new ride and know that somebody is there to make sure you have some guidance on the route. For example, down in Eugene, there was one road where the shoulder had a lot of cracks in it that a bike wheel could fit in. Having a heads up about that was reassuring, but also potentially avoided a nasty crash. I also want to thank you ride leaders out there for making group rides friendly for inexperienced riders. Whether you have an active club nearby or you just get out and explore on your own, I hope that your cycling adventures are exceptional. And remember, age is just a gear change.